Hey everyone, welcome to the stream. Sorry as I make myself a little bit more dressed formally. Sorry about, I think I'm 1 minute late, which actually really surprises me because 45 minutes ago I was actually walking in the town north of where I live, and Google Maps told me that it would take 1 hour and 15 minutes to get home. Um, so I basically did that in 45 minutes. It's warm, I'm sweating, but I made it. So hope you can understand me. By the way, I think the camera works. Microphone seems to be working. Yeah, I got lost track of time, as sometimes happens when I'm out on a walk. So I made this decision, or this commitment actually, to go out for a walk every single day after lunch, and it's non-negotiable. So whatever happens, I need to get out for a walk. And oftentimes I will also use that time to kind of come up with stories, or record a podcast, or even develop a course. The thing is, after lunch today, I got distracted. There was some stuff that I needed to finish first, and before I knew it, it was already 4 o'clock. And I was like, okay, I need to wrap this up quickly, and then I need to go out for a walk. So I get my steps in. And so I think I left home around 5, something like that. And I told myself, you know what? I'm just going to walk for 1 hour, and then I'll be back in time for the live stream. And so I started walking, and I usually go into the woods, but I kind of wanted to change things up. So I walked there's a really nice neighborhood here that extends all the way to the city of Ede. And it's really nice, the Dutch countryside, little farms and sheep and beautiful gardens. And I barely ever go there. So I had a blast just walking there. And then I got very inspired. And a story emerged about a mouse and a cat. Yeah, very original, I know. The thing that kind of distinguishes it from a kind of a common Tom and Jerry type of story was that this takes place in the Vatican, and the mouse wants to become a saint, wants to become the first the first mouse with a statue on St. Peter's Square, and the cat is going to help him with that. I won't spoil the story because you'll have to wait. It's probably going to publish this over the weekend. But I just kept making up the story as I went, and there was I think a fun twist at the end that I didn't see coming. And so that took about, 40 minutes, 35 minutes. I recorded it actually on my mobile recorder. So that's what I usually do. And then I come home, I have it transcribed on the computer, and then I start chiseling it and turning it into a short story, because usually the first draft is way too long. So I was quite happy with that. And then I noticed, like, oh my gosh, in 45 minutes I got to be back for the live stream. So I used my GPS to kind of find the quickest way home. And then when I was almost halfway, I noticed that I was starting to kind of make up for the time lost, and I would probably arrive a little bit too late, but I would be okay. And so that gave me some extra piece to, start thinking again. And then the second story came up, and this is a story that takes place in the catacombs of Rome. And you may know this statue, this marble statue, is very famous, of Jesus, depicted as the Good Shepherd. So it's a young boy, no beard, just curly hair, and on his shoulders he has a lamb, and that became like an iconic image to depict Jesus, who tells this story about the shepherd who goes tries to find the lost sheep. And so I had an idea for that story. I wanted to somehow to have the boy and the sheep kind of model for that statue. So I would tell their story, and then they would get lost in the catacombs. And that's, of course, I've been in the catacombs several times, and it is really a maze. And it's super dark there. if you lose your way, you may not actually ever get back. And so stuff happens, and there is an ending, which is a bit transcendental and surprising. And so I literally finished telling that story when I walked up the path here in the backyard up to the door, and 2 minutes later I'm here. So that's a little sneak peek of kind of how I work creatively. My best stories always emerge by themselves. I don't plan it in advance. I might just tell myself, hey, I want to tell a story. I don't know what it's going to be about. And then it's just there all of a sudden. And sometimes it's just the beginning of the story, and then the ending kind of starts shaping while I tell the story. It's fascinating as a process, and I have a blast. So just to bring you up to speed, I've been doing this for a week now. I started the Substack last week. Maybe I already had it up when I did the stream last week. I don't recall. And I made a commitment to tell a short story every day, and I've been doing that for about 8 days now. 9 days. And so, and I'm posting them on my Substack, and it's a ton of fun. Some of these stories did really well. Like I wrote a story about the little seagull family on top of the roof of the Sistine Chapel during the White Smoke. And that story really, I think, hit a chord with a lot of readers. And I even got a message from the New York Times. They wanted to write an article about it. Like, what? And unfortunately for my dear seagulls, there was a new pope, and he was American. So once that news broke, they skipped the story. But it was still quite something, you know. I've never done this before, and then within a week, you get that type of exposure. It's a lot of fun because I love telling stories, and I'm super happy that there is actually an audience out there for it. So. And so I keep, whenever inspiration strikes, I just record the story, and then I don't immediately start the editing phase. So I do that in the morning. That's actually the first thing I do when I sit here at the computer. And it's kind of like a warm-up, almost like a creative warm-up, because I've already done a lot of the thinking. So the draft is there. And so I take an hour to kind of distill the essence of the story and try to write it nicely, and then I post it, and then usually I'm already writing, so it becomes easier. That's at least what I hope, to also take, let's say, 1 or 2 hours to write a chapter of my fantasy novel. But even if that doesn't work, I still create a story every single day. So by the end of this month, I will probably already have my first anthology that I can publish. And that's something if you told me that 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed it, because, how, but it's actually very, very easy. These stories just, it somehow feels like they've been waiting for me for 50 years to write them down. And I just love it. I totally love it. I'm still kind of debating on whether or not I should also narrate these stories. So what I do is the recordings that I make of the first draft, and it's basically, I'm not sure if it's really interesting to listen to, but you hear me kind of make up the story. So I was telling the story of this mouse and this cat, and at one point I just laughed out loud because of something that happened in the story, and I didn't see it coming. And that in itself, for me, that's magic. I don't know if it comes across, but I post these as a podcast. But I'm still thinking, with the kind of exposure that I have on YouTube and also my experience on TikTok, would this be something that people would be interested in? So if I would, for instance, just sit down in a nice setting, or maybe even outside in the forest on a bench or something like that, and just tell that story. I mean, it's like the opposite of what I do with my anime TikToks, where it's like super, how do you say that? It's constructed. It's everything. Every phrase is optimized for maximum viewer retention. And I'm pretty good at that, but that wouldn't work with a story. But I keep wondering, is there a market? Is there an audience for kind of slow storytelling, like cozy stories? I don't know. If you have any ideas about that, please let me know, because I'll write the stories and I'll tell the stories regardless. I write them mostly for myself, but obviously, it's if it makes people smile or think, then that's even cooler. All right, let me go to your questions. Thanks, by the way, for stopping by. Welcome to all of you on YouTube. Welcome also if you're watching this on Facebook, and if you're watching this on LinkedIn. Thanks. I'm unfortunately unable to read the comments on LinkedIn, but feel free to leave a comment and I'll certainly get back to it as soon as I'm back on LinkedIn. Indonesia asks, let me put this on the screen here so you can read along. Hello, Father. I would like to ask you to cover Hell's Paradise or Spy versus Family or Dan or the Chainsaw movie coming out this year. So that's a question coming from my anime channel. Thank you so much for the suggestions. I love that. I don't think I've ever heard of the first one you mentioned, Hell's Paradise, but sounds like, something up my alley since it's about paradise and hell. So I probably have some opinions about that. Spy X Family. I don't know actually how you pronounce the X. I always thought it was Spy versus Family, but I think it's about this family and there's this little girl who is a spy, or they're all spies. I think I watched an episode a while ago, and it's fun. I really enjoyed it. I just kind of lost track of it, but I know it's super popular. It's one of the most popular anime series, so eventually I'll probably watch it. The Dan, that sounds intriguing. I'll look around, see if I can find that on Crunchyroll or elsewhere. The Chainsaw movie, absolutely going to talk about that because I watched the entire first season of Chainsaw Man. I read the manga. I think it's an incredible story. Very dark at times, but also extremely intriguing and weird. And there's so much I would like to say about that. So yeah, thank you so much for mentioning that. And I'll keep you up to speed. Samuel is putting his youngest to bed, and that is so I'm just I'll try to lower my voice a little bit and go into story like bedtime story mode. Andrew wants to know, let me put that on the screen. What do you think of the selection of the new Pope? Well, Andrew, it totally took me by surprise. Actually, I've been sick for most of the week. And I'd been in bed for hours in the afternoon after lunch. So I just got up because I committed myself to giving my second lesson of a course, an online course that I give about the Saints of Ireland. And at 7 o'clock in the evening, my students would gather online and I would have to talk an hour about the Celtic Saints. And so I was sitting here, like translating some slides and preparing, and I had the Vatican stream open with the live feed. It was a gorgeous day in Rome, and but I thought, no, there's not going to be a white smoke tonight. They've been there for 2 days. Nobody has a clue. Like before the start of the conclave, everybody was like, yeah, we cannot tell at all in advance. There's no ideal candidate. This might be a long conclave, especially because apparently the opinions on what kind of pope the cardinals wanted. Do they want someone just like Francis? Is there even someone like Pope Francis? Probably not. Or would they kind of reverse, and would they want something who would just go step on the brakes and maybe even revert some of the stuff that Pope Francis wanted to implement? And so because there were so many different opinions, I totally expected to last at least until Saturday, And so I'm sitting here and with a mild headache, and all of a sudden I hear the sound coming from the square, and it's like people are cheering, and like, yeah, look, white smoke, oh jeez. And then that was literally like an hour before the course would start. So I knew that the students some of them would probably log on and may not even be aware that there was a new pope. But at the same time, of course, I wanted to was glued to the screen. I wanted to see what would happen, and I was super curious. And so some of the students hopped online, and I told them, hey, I don't know about the course. First of all, I'm still sick. And secondly, there happens to be a new pope, and we all want to see who that is. And so we kind of watched it together. That was fun. And then when the cardinal came on the balcony and said, Annuncio vobis gaudis what is it, magnum gaudium? My Latin is rusty. Habemus Papam. I was like, my heart was like skipping a beat. And then the first names, the first name, Robert, something, I was like, what? Who is this? And then Prevost. I was like, who is that? Literally, I had no idea. But then the commentators were like, an American Pope. And like my jaw hit the floor. Like, what? Wait, what? They chose an American cardinal to be the next Pope? I was really, really surprised. And so it took forever for the new Pope to arrive, and so we could see him. And then my first impression was, this looks like someone like Paul VI. Oh, by the way, I was also very surprised about the name that he picked. I was kind of expecting someone like Paul VI, someone who would continue the kind of the charism of, like, at the time, John the 23rd, who announced the Vatican Council, and then Pope Paul VI kind of finished that whole process. And I felt like we're in a similar type of era right now, where you had this very charismatic Pope Francis who launched something that was so crazy that nobody saw it coming, and now you need someone to kind of anchor that into the life of the church. And so my first impression was like, well, looks like they found another Paul VI. So I expected him to be the Paul VII, but instead it was Leo the 14th. And afterwards, of course, he explained why. And then I noticed that he had written down his address, which was kind of surprising. First of all, when did he have time to write that down, There's not much. I mean, it took a while, but you have to get dressed. There's lots of stuff happening between the moment that the announcement is done and then the balcony scene. And then I was pleasantly surprised that he was speaking in a very calm way. He looked gentle. There were little telltale signs that he was actually very emotional. His hands were like shaking a little bit, and his eyes were twitching, and it wasn't allergies. And so that was like, oh wow, this is someone who actually, he is very overwhelmed by the enthusiasm, but he also knows that he's got a job to do. He wants to get his message across, and then he's starting with peace, like peace be with you. And he started to talk about Christ first. And I was like, this is good. This is someone who knows that he's just a servant of the church and a servant of Christ. And he puts Christ first. That's a good sign. This is someone apparently at first sight with not much ego. It's not about him. It's about the message. And then I love that he was insisting so much about peace, because that's what we're all craving, right? We need the world to hear about peace again. We need some hope. And then, he said, well, we do this together. And I want to build bridges. Those were actually the three words that struck me a lot. It's like peace, together, and building bridges. And for some reason, it's totally different from Francis, and kind of the way he presented himself made me miss the spontaneity of Pope Francis and the humor. But at the same time, what I loved was that this man, even though you get tasked with maybe the biggest responsibility on the planet, he seemed to be totally himself. He didn't try to project something. I felt like this is what you see is what you get. And I love it when people are able to do that. So I was very, very impressed by that, and happy and thankful. And then, of course, later on, you see more kind of improvised moments where the cameras follow him and he's greeting people, and he seems to be like the perfect guy for the job. Very friendly, calm, but also someone who knows what he's talking about, and I think also knows what he wants and what the world needs to hear. And he's not afraid to say out loud what maybe others would just think. And I think this is a pope that might surprise us. I can tell that he's growing in his job, in his role, very, very quickly. So, yeah, it was a total surprise. And at the same time, it was a huge affirmation for me that the Holy Spirit knew what he was doing. And the cardinals actually knew what they wanted, because this man got the votes very quickly. And if we have to believe the rumors, also very convincingly. He got way more than the majority that he needed. And that's comforting, because it means that all these cardinals were united in the same inspiration or the same intuition that led them to choose Pope Leo. So yeah, I'm a very happy priest. I love how young he is. Like, he's 69, you know. It's been a while since we had a pope that young. I mean, Pope John Paul II, of course, was a young pope. But it's kind of like surprising to see a pope walking around and just like walking like I don't know, someone with energy. Yeah, amazing. I hope he's going to be around for a while. So I was very content. It inspired me. Like a day later, I came up with this story. Maybe you've read it, but it's kind of an homage to Narnia. And I saw a photo of the what they call the Room of Tears inside or it's actually adjacent to the Sistine Chapel, and that's called the Room of Tears because usually that's where the Pope will change into his formal white cassock and the other vestments, and that's usually when the realization occurs. You know, I've been chosen to be the Pope, and that's sometimes people will cry, and so hence the name, the Room of Tears. So I saw a photo of this that they published before the conclave, and it showed the rack with the cassocks, and there was an ugly couch in the corner, like this red. It looked so out of place. But anyway, and then there was this door. Now, I don't think I've ever been in that room, but the door was closed, and I didn't think it was going to a corridor or anything. So immediately I was like, what's behind that door? I want to know. I Googled, couldn't find anything about it. And so that's where my imagination started to spin a story. Like, what if that is actually a cupboard? What if that's a wardrobe? And they have some old vestments there. Maybe not the white cassocks, but just some old stuff there. You have plenty of those wardrobes all over Rome. Every sacristy has one. So, and then I was like, wardrobe. Wait. The lion, Leo, the lion. No, not the witch. I cannot do a witch. Is there something that kind of sounds like witch? Bridge. Yeah, he talks about bridges, and so it's the lion, the bridge, and the wardrobe, and the story was there. And so I told the story, posted it, and I'm actually quite happy with how it turned out. I think it's almost like a bit like a Narnia-esque story. And it's over the course of this week that I'm starting to find my style of storytelling and kind of the type of story that I'm good at. And this was one of them. All right. Samuel says, please continue to pray for my brother. He's still at the hospital. The doctors think it might be meningitis or encephalitis. It can be very serious. Oh yeah, if it's meningitis, that could be life-threatening even. Oh boy, well, thank you so much for encouraging us to pray for him, and we will certainly do so. I hope it's going to turn out all right. He's in good hands, but this must be very scary for everyone. Steven is there. I'm so glad to see you, Steve, all the way in San Diego. So I guess it's still morning over there, right? But it's great to see you. If you're ever back in my neck of the woods, please tell me. And this time I won't put you on a bike. We might go for another round of pancakes, though. Galactic Empire Sumo. Hey, Father, I'm turning 47 and I am at a standstill in my life. I have all of these things that I want to do, but I feel like I don't have passion for anything. I keep feeling like I need guidance. Thank you for sharing that. And rest assured, I think all of us have been there at one point or another in our lives. You're like 47 is kind of this strange, or in your 40s, between 40 and 50, that's kind of that weird threshold moment between the life that you've lived and the life ahead of you. And you're kind of in between the first part of your life and the second part of your life. What a lot of people forget is that, in fact, we say, yeah, like the first 47 years, what have I done? Where am I now? I feel like I haven't even started yet. And yet I still don't know what to choose and where to go next. But you have to keep in mind that a large part of that first part of your life, you spend it as a child, as a student. You were growing up. So you are now starting a part of your life where you are there with all your faculties, everything you've experienced, maybe also already the kind of the hard moments in life that have taught you things. And so you are actually way more prepared and ready for this next part of your life, this next adventure than you think you are. It's just that I think as a priest, I would say God is kind of has been waiting for this moment to tell you where he wants you to go. And sometimes God allows us to get stuck so that we look beyond the obvious, so that this unrest that you feel is actually something that you see in the lives of great saints. Think of Saint Augustine, the new Pope Leo. He is an Augustinian priest. And the life of Saint Augustine shows this same question, this same unrest, this same restlessness, where at one point Saint Augustine is like, I don't know, I do so much, and at the same time my life seems so empty, and I have a ton of things that I can do, and yet I don't even know what the next step should be, and it depressed him. And then it's at that moment where he actually is out of options that something in his heart starts to open. And I think that God was waiting for that moment in order to guide him. God is very modest, he absolutely does not want to pressure us or to make us feel that, that we only live life out of obligation or something like that. He waits for us to open the door. And if we do, so that question that you asked me, I would encourage you, of course I don't know exactly your background, but what I would do in your situation and what I have done in my life several times when I was in a situation that was similar, I just prayed. And it was like, and even with all my doubts sometimes, like, God, I remember praying this when I was 17, and I had to choose a career, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember praying in a corner of my room and saying out loud what I actually was afraid to say. And it's like, God, I don't even know if you exist. Maybe I'm just making all this up. But maybe it's just my imagination. Maybe it's just fairy tales, I have no idea if you exist, but if you exist, I would like to have some help because I have no clue what you want. But I'm just going to, let me share with you the hypothesis of your existence. So if you happen to exist, then I'm ready to follow you. I'm ready to, because you probably know what I should do. I don't know. So if you exist, point me the way. Tell me what to do. Where do you want me to go? No answer. No insights, no big revelations, no apparition of the Virgin Mary or my guardian angel who showed me the way. I was like, okay, well that was worth a try. No pain, no gain. And then a couple of weeks or months later, I find myself in Lourdes, in France, in this place where, according to the stories, the Virgin Mary had appeared to Bernadette, a young girl. And I'm there, and there's this big youth event or youth festival, and like this is the first time in my life that I see people in church that are younger than 65, you know, and so lots of other students and people my age, and they're all very comfortable apparently with church and with faith, and we pray together. And I think that's where something started to happen. So I returned home from Lourdes, and I knew that God wanted me to be a priest. And in hindsight, when I look back, it's like it all started with that prayer where I was like, yeah, I don't know if you exist. I certainly didn't pray for God to, push me in the direction of the priesthood. That was the last thing that it didn't even cross my mind. I mean, that was something for old people that seemed to be like the most boring job in the world. Seriously. And yet, here we are. Had I not opened the door at that point, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So I would say, don't worry. You've got nothing to lose. Just bring it up to God and tell him where you are right now in life. Say, I'm stuck. You know me better than I know myself. Lead the way. And maybe you will require a little bit of patience. Don't worry. Asking the question is already the first step in solving the conundrum. That's what I would say. This question you're asking yourself, where should I go? I mean, you're so far ahead of the majority of people who just live their life in this ongoing treadmill of like, well, I go to work, I make some money, I go home, I eat, I watch TV, I go to sleep, rinse and repeat. I mean, yeah, that's how a lot of people live their life. You're way ahead of that because you're asking yourself questions, and you feel that all the things that the world throws at you and the things you see other people do, you're looking at it and saying, yeah, I could probably do that, but and oh yeah, that's what a lot of other people do. Yeah, I'm not motivated by that. I don't feel any passion for that. And these are, it sounds like you're stuck, but these are all moments of discernment because you feel like, oh, no passion for that. No, my heart is not in there. How does the Bible say it? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You will know that you figured out what to do when you feel that in your heart. When you feel this energy, then you will know this is what I am supposed to do. And unfortunately, and that's the hard part, there's no secret formula for that. There's no like 10-step plan that you can follow. Obviously, you can do some steps yourself to try to kind of get that clarity. Praying would be one thing. For me, also, what has helped me many times when I'm stuck like that, I take a piece of paper and I put a divider in the middle, and then on the left side, I just write down everything that comes to mind that I could do next. Projects or just like the 50,000 ideas that I always have in my mind because ADHD, and I don't know what to do, and it's super overwhelming. I write them all down, and then I go through it, and then I cross what I think, yeah, no, and then I can easily cross off a lot of stuff, and then the ones that are like tickling me, like, I don't know, I still really like that, I put them in the right column. And then I end up with, let's say, 10 ideas. And then I rank them. And I do like, okay, so if I had to choose 3 or 5 of these, which ones would I do? And I don't put any limits on that. I just like, I also write down the impossible stuff. Like, dream big. If my life was in my hands and I could dream up my ideal future, something that would really, that sometimes just allowing yourself to write that down is helps you unlock it. And so I rank it like, what would be the best of the best in this whole list? That's number 1, and then number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you go and you reduce it to 3. And then out of those 3, you pick the 1. And maybe that one thing, the number 1 thing, is something that you think is completely out of reach and completely crazy, and you wouldn't even say it out loud because you're jinxing it. But you feel that your heart goes out to that one thing. That's your lead. Follow that, and then something will come out. But it will take time and it will take patience. But this is a time where you learn how to listen to your heart, and it's in your heart, I think, that God whispers. I know this sounds way easier said than done, and yet I'm still sharing it because it works. It has worked in my life, and it's still something I go back to whenever I'm stuck. So if you want, if this helps in the future, give it time. Once you find out what to do, I'd love it if you could get back to me and tell me about it. And of course, you're in my thoughts and in my prayers. I don't know if it's any help, but I feel for you because we've all been there. Mike says hi. I'm glad you like the stories. Sometimes when I'm writing these stories and I'm sharing them, the other day I was talking to, like, with ChatGPT. I was kind of doing some brainstorming, and I asked, like, am I overdoing it? 1 story per day. And then ChatGPT said, yeah, you're overdoing it. Nobody can keep up with a new story every day. I'm like, oh, yikes. But at the same time, I told myself, well, I'm mostly doing this for myself. This is just to strengthen my storytelling muscle. And the cool thing about these stories is they're basically evergreen. A good story is also a good story a year from now. And I already see that sometimes, so I post these teasers on Instagram. Sometimes, like, days later, people will find that post, or the algorithm will show it to them. And then they can discover that story there and then. So I have to kind of step away from the instant gratification aspect and just, like, trust that these stories are going to find their way to the people that are supposed to read them. But it's still nice to know that that some people enjoy them right away. That's encouraging. About the discussion that we had, or the talk that we had a little bit earlier, something is missing. I used to have faith when I was younger. How do you get faith back after learning? Oops, sorry, I'm pressing the wrong button. After learning more through adulthood. Yeah, well, faith, is a gift. It's something. And a gift, it doesn't mean that you get it and you don't get it. It's more like Oprah, you get it, but you have to also receive it. But I think the idea that faith is a gift is more an expression of the fact that you cannot manufacture it. It's something that faith is a relationship, and a relationship begins not with knowledge or insight, but it begins with an open heart. And so, if you long for faith, but you don't know how to get it back, start by just opening your heart, and literally, like, pouring out your heart for God. Just tell him, and you can even, it's totally fine, as I have demonstrated, to say, God, you probably don't exist, I have my doubts, but what have I got to lose? Here's my story. Just catch him up on what's going on in your life. And maybe he'll surprise you. Maybe. Melanie reacts from Facebook. I enjoy listening to stories, especially in my car. You have a great voice, calming and engaging to captivate the listener. That's good to hear, Melanie. So yeah, maybe I'll just continue to record the first draft as a podcast and then read the final story on a video. I think even on YouTube, if I put that in a podcast feed, you can actually subscribe to it, at least through YouTube. It's probably not an open system, but it's good to know. I think I mean, I would enjoy listening to a podcast with just stories, especially if I have trouble falling asleep. I like people to read bedtime stories to me. So, why shouldn't I provide that service? It's probably not going to be a box office success in terms of listenership, but I just feel that there probably is an audience for something like that. Paul is also there from beautiful Malta. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. And then we've got Dragon King, who says, Father, I want to ask, if we are one with Christ and have been adopted as children of God, what would make us gods as well? Well, we're not really supposed to be gods ourselves, because there is only one God, and well, he encompasses everything. So God, just the concept of God, at least from a metaphysical perspective, is God is everything. So you cannot have two everythings, or two infinites. So it kind of makes sense that God is one, but at the same time, the Bible kind of conveys this image of God who is revealing himself as being three persons. So it's a relationship. God is a relationship. It's an eternal exchange of love. And the way I see it, or the way I picture it, is if God in himself is this relationship where the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father back, and that love is so intense that it is God himself. It is a third person. It is what we call the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is kind of the love between the Father and the Son, and it's you cannot say, well, it's the Spirit comes from the Father or the Spirit comes from the Son. No, the Spirit is what they exchange. Then that in my mind, that creates a twister that is like, there's this love and it's just twirling and it's like constantly in movement. And I see myself as someone who is sucked up by the force of that tornado of love, and I become part of it. So it doesn't mean that I become God, but I am in God, and God is in me. So that's kind of how I picture it, and it's probably also because I love the movie Twister, and that image just works for me. Hope that helps. Melanie says, hope you feel better soon. I do feel a lot better. There's no coughing anymore. I think I barely escaped a bronchitis. And it's because I calmed myself down. So most of the time I was sitting here writing stories. And you can do that even if you are sick. Kit says, I believe that Christ is our Savior. Do you? I would reply, is the Pope Catholic? Yes, obviously. Now, what does that entail? What does that mean? That, of course, is a much more interesting question. So how does Christ save me? And I would say it's something that he did when I was baptized, obviously. And I feel like that he took me in his arms and said, you belong to me and I belong to you. It's like the start of a love story. Every baptism is the start of a relationship. But then, he will never stop loving me. He will never stop trying to save me. I, on the contrary, I'm very good at running away and running astray, and maybe even sometimes rejecting this offer to be saved. And so, time and again, Christ will do everything he can to bring me back, to steer me back. And so for me, when I say Christ is my Savior, I mean that in an active way. He's saving me every single day. He's helping me to grow closer to Him, to grow closer to His Father. And that I call that saving me because it's usually I'm coming from a place that is a little bit more remote. But same image, it's this twister that goes after me and it just wants me to lift me up, you know? Anyway, I'm a visual thinker, as you can tell. Dragon King says, why would Eve want to be like God when she's already been made to the image of God? Well, that is kind of why the story is so interesting. It is probably the same question that God asked himself. You know, why do they want to be like me? Haven't I given them all I have? And so it's the age-old lie of the snake that there's always something you cannot get, and that your life can only be complete if you have it all. So basically, you don't need God anymore because you have it all. You are like God. You have what God has. And whereas the whole purpose of why God created us is to love us. He didn't need us. He just wanted to love us. And so the moment we say, well, we don't need you, if we eat from this tree, we'll be like you. We don't need you anymore. That's the end of the relationship. That's the true tragedy of the story of Adam and Eve. It's two people that think they've been lured into believing that God is not enough. And that's serious business, you know? And in a way, this lie keeps repeating over and over again throughout history. It's like, you don't have enough. God kind of doesn't want you to have this, or it's like always putting God in the role of the bad guy. So, you know, he probably doesn't exist, and if he doesn't exist, you just go for it. You know, dolce vita. What is it? Live now and grab it while you can. And this creates a hunger that can never be stilled. Because we're made for God, as you say, we're made in the image of God, which means our heart vibrates when we're close to God. And when we're far away from Him, our heart starts to hurt because it misses God. It misses the source of what brought us into existence. God is like a magnet, and we're the opposite pole, and so there's this natural attraction. But it's like if you turn one magnet around, what do you get? You get rejection. And so I feel like the devil is in this story is trying to he cannot do it himself because free will, right? Even the devil cannot force us, just like God cannot force us. But he convinces through lies, he convinces Adam and Eve to turn the magnet of their heart in the opposite direction. And all of a sudden, they seem unable to get closer to God. And this is why God sends Jesus to be like us, humans. But at the same time, you see that Jesus, the magnet of his heart is turned towards his Father. And it's so strong. It's another nice image for the Holy Spirit. What is the Holy Spirit? It's the magnetism that brings these two together. And that love is so strong that it can even survive death. That for me is that's the necessary how do you say that? Conclusion of that story that began with the story of Adam and Eve. Now, these are all stories, right? This is not, Bible is not a history book. It's not journalism. But these are very fundamental stories that tell us something that may not be true in the sense that we say, well, it happened like that. But it is true on a much deeper level. And theology is about kind of trying to get closer to that truth and see if we can understand a little bit. And even though you can never truly, fully understand it, what I've always felt when I studied theology is I cannot comprehend it, but it feels like it's fitting. It fits. It makes sense. It makes more sense than the universe and history just being pure randomness. I find that much harder to believe than this internal logic of the Bible, however, broken it sometimes is, in the sense that it's still written down by people and it's handed over by people, these stories. So there are flaws in the Bible, but just flaws in the execution, I could say. But the true voice of the Bible, the voice of God, is below the words. It's underneath it, and it makes sense. And anyway, I probably don't make much sense, but these are kind of high concept things to talk about. All right, let's see. I probably need to do a little bit of moderation here. How do I do this? There we go. Yep. All right. Very good. I'm always a little bit behind. I don't really have any moderators in the chat, so it's a little bit... sometimes you get people that just want to run around and break things. Children. Very good. Where were we? Neil. Hey, Neil. I've been curious about your fantasy novel. Are you writing your first draft in Dutch or in English? I am writing it in English. Don't ask why, because it's so much harder than writing in Dutch. I think I know why. I mean, it would be easier to write it in Dutch. Much, much easier. I would probably also do a much better job, because I have much more proficiency in Dutch compared to English. But I do this, and I've discovered why. Because if I speak in a different language, if I speak English, my brain thinks differently. There are different neural pathways. And this is because you learn a language by immersing yourself in stories, right? So I was taught Dutch in school by my parents, and even when I started to learn how to write, it was always through stories. Like the alphabet, every letter had a little image, and there was a story that went with the image, and so that's how I learned to write. And so the Dutch stories have crafted my brain to a certain extent. And then I started to learn English. And how did I learn English? By reading stories, by reading books. So I read a lot of literature. I read the Lord of the Rings, etc. And so a lot of my imaginary world has been formed by the stories that I loved. And so what kind of books did I read? Fantasy and science fiction. That was all I've ever read. And I think, and I barely have ever read fantasy in Dutch, which means that my imagination is used to English pathways. Does that make sense? So if I have to switch on my storytelling brain, I automatically switch to English. And even now, the majority of the books that I read, the majority of fantasy books that I read them in English. It feels natural. And so that's why if I notice that when I'm writing in English, even with these short stories that I write now, it just flows. It's a different story. I tell stories in Dutch as well in church whenever I see kids or families, I always tell a little story, and it's a Dutch tale. Those stories are different in character compared to the ones that I tell in English. I don't know how it works, but I think it is kind of how our brain works. The same is true with French. If I want to pray, I pray in French. Why? Because I went to seminary in French part of Belgium. And so I learned how to pray in French, and it still feels like my mother tongue when it comes to praying. I don't think I could write in French. Not because I don't know how to write in French or I don't master the vocabulary, or I think I'm actually more at ease in French than I am in English. My vocabulary is much larger, and I know how to say things really in a pretty way. So I can be very poetic in French. Not so much in English, not yet. I'm learning, but And yet, I don't think I've ever told a story in French. And I don't think it would work because that my brain has not been primed enough story-wise when it comes to French. Anyway, long story. But yes, I'm writing in English. We've got Vinicius from Brazil. Muito bem. I really like your podcast. They really help me practice English, and they are my daily dose of geeky and spiritual content. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm glad to be of service, and be aware though that my English is, I think it's adequate, but I still am not a native speaker. So you may learn like the Father Roderick version of English. I would love to listen to Brazilian podcasts. So if you have a tip of like a geeky podcast in Brazilian, in Portuguese, because Portuguese is still on my want list, my wish list of languages that I want. One day in my life, I want to learn Portuguese because it's one of the most beautiful languages in the world. And that's not hyperbole. I mean that. I think that Portuguese is, it's poetry. It's so beautiful. And yet, I learned Italian before I got to learn Spanish or Portuguese. I love Spanish as well. Italian, Italian is good for opera. I don't like the language as such. The way it's pronounced, the cadence, no, it's not my thing. Portuguese, yeah, that's. But how do I learn that? I never go to Portugal. I certainly will probably never go to Brazil. I've been to Brazil once for World Youth Day, of course, but that was just 2 weeks, so I didn't have time to really mingle with people. But what you do, listening to my podcast to pick up some English, I could do the same, but I need to have a podcast that is about my sphere of interest. So it needs to be something geeky or something about Star Wars, because then that helps me to understand what it's talking about. If you have any tips, let me know. Let's see. Paul also says, enjoying your short stories. The Lion, the Bridge, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, I loved writing that one. Frankie says, that couch was many things, but ugly was not it. Well, it's a matter of taste. I mean, I would never want to have a couch like that in my living room, you know? It's like, yeah. But, yeah, what do I know? It's a little bit too over the top for me, a couch like that. I wanted something a bit more rustic inside the Vatican, but then again, I'm talking about the room next to the Sistine Chapel. So I guess if you like the Michelangelo stuff, then that couch kind of works. Yeah, let's say it's for me, it's all a bit too much. I'm much more of a aesthetically, I like just medieval stuff, you know, like the simplicity. Most of the decorations and the paintings and the frescoes in Rome, it's way too much sugar for me. It's too many colors. It's just too busy. I mean, if I look at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, I mean, most people are raving about it, and when I look up, it's like I see ADHD, but then painted on a ceiling. And like, please, this is what's happening in my brain. I don't want that on my ceiling. Thankfully, it's not my ceiling. Pete wants to know if I'm gonna get GTA 6. Probably at one point when it's on sale, like 5 years from now. But yeah, I don't play GTA much. I do like games that have like open world games, but well, in terms of contents, of course, GTA is not really my kind of story. But yeah, those games are pretty impressive. Lauren says that they're going to make the Silver Chair. The Narnia series is in development. Looking forward to that. Zizi says, Father, I'm struggling with motivation, drive, and discipline to write Feels like I freeze up every time I want to continue. Have you ever felt like this? Oh, yes. And if so, do you have any advice for me? Yes. Oh, gosh, yes. I've not been writing as long as you have, probably. But yeah, when I started to write, I was determined to write the entire first draft in 1 month. I knew I could do it. I'm going to do it every day. I'm going to sit down and I write for 3 hours. I even had I'm going to write 3,000 words a day, no matter what. No, it's non-negotiable. Yeah, that really didn't work out. So I know what I've learned is to I just let it be. A lot of my writer's journey has been accepting that sometimes you're inspired and sometimes not. Some people will be really great at writing anyway, you know. Other people just can't, and they get blocked. And the more they try to force themselves, the harder it becomes. I waited. So I wrote a couple of chapters, a bit of the overall structure. The more I wrote, the more I got stuck. And I think ultimately it was because I didn't have my outline. So I didn't actually know what kind of story I wanted to tell. And I thought I was a pantser, but I'm not. I'm a plotter. I need to first know where I'm going. And then I can come up with new ideas. And so I went back to the drawing board and started to really think through my overall structure. So what helped me a lot was that I was going into the woods for a walk, and I just took my recorder with me and I just recorded. I was just brainstorming, like, okay, so what if this happens? What if that happens? And I just tried to not stop myself. It didn't have to make sense. I was just like brain dumping. And then I took that, I had it transcribed on my computer, and I put it in ChatGPT. And I said, okay, so look at this and put some order in these ideas. And just like summarize it. And that gave me a nice document where all of a sudden I could see some structure. And it was like basically like, okay, you talked about this, you talked about that, you talked about that, you talked about that, you talked about that. And that was almost like I finally saw the pieces of the puzzle. And that unblocked me. And then I started, okay, this works. I'm going to put this here. Then this happens, then that happens. And I could also see where the gaps were in the story. And so I sat down here and I told myself, you don't have to write. You don't have to, make any progress, but continue to think. Just write down, almost like a journal, whatever comes to your mind, and try to write that, those 40 chapters. What's going to happen in every chapter? And so it helped to use the 3-part structure. It's like the first stage or the first act. It's like all the world building and the inciting incident and refusal of the call, all the usual stuff. And that helped me. Okay, so this needs to happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, and here, this is where the adventure starts. And then the middle part, I had no idea. I did know, I had a few ideas about how I wanted it to end. So I first wrote the ending. I was like, I didn't write it. I was like, okay, so at the third act, I want this to happen. It was very vague. I felt like it also really didn't work. But yeah, it was some kind of an ending. And then I went back to the second act. And I was like, okay, so second act, it's basically the structure is like a pyramid, right? The first part of the story is you ascend. It's exciting and stuff happens, adventures, everything goes well. And then in the middle of that, you have like a twist or something happens and then everything goes downhill from there because you want your hero to be at the end of his wits when our Act 3 starts. That also helped me. And then I was like, okay, so I have the main story. I knew a few things that needed to happen just to be able to get to the ending. And then I just started to come up with things. So what would be cool to happen? What would be fun and what would be devastating? How can I torture my main characters? And then I started to slot that into the gaps of the story, and then I developed a secondary story. So I split up the group of the characters, and a bit like Empire Strikes Back. So I looked a lot at the structure of Empire Strikes Back, And so I had a second group of people, and kind of like I wanted that to be its own story, but it also had to somehow relate back to the other group. And that gave me an idea about something that they were after. So basically a secondary quest. And once I had that, now I'm at the point where I feel like confident enough that I can go back to writing. However, I read back what I'd written a month ago. And it's like, oh, yeah, actually that works. It's really good, but it's no longer the story that I'm telling right now. This is a different version. And so I felt like, well, maybe in order to motivate myself, because I basically have to start all over again, what helps me is to start small and to get writing. That's the most important thing. And then once I'm in writing mode, it's easier to get going with the chapters as well, because I will have already broken the ice. That's how I came up with this short story idea. Like what I can do is like I write a short story every day, 1 hour. It's based on something I already came up with before, so it's not like I have to start from scratch, because that would usurp too much of my creative energy. And then after that hour, I will continue to write another chapter. I have ADHD, so I've learned some tricks to get going, because I'm quickly overwhelmed if it's too big, and writing a novel is very overwhelming. So I know that what helps me is this little device. It's a timer. I turn it on. It says, you probably can't see it because it's not focusing. Is it focusing? Yeah, there you go. So this is my Pomodoro, 25 minutes. I press go, and then I will write for 25 minutes. And even if that's the only Pomodoro that I do during the day, I will have written for 25 minutes. It stacks, it compounds over time. What always happens is that once I do 25 minutes, I have more than enough ideas for the next 25 minutes. So that would be my trick. Try that out if it works for you. Set a timer for 5 minutes and say, I'm going to write for 5 minutes. And then that will go. And even if you feel like I'm really stuck, I don't know where to go with this story, leave it be. Just let it rest. If the story needs to be told, it will come back to you, but never stop writing. If you can't write that story, go write something else, even if it's just for yourself. Spin a story, write something in the same world that you're building. That's what I do now so you may have noticed if you follow me on Substack, some of my stories definitely have this kind of fantasy vibe to it. And in fact, in my mind, they do take place in the same world of my novel. But they can be read independently. I'm basically just these small stories are part of my world building. It's what Tolkien did in his Unfinished Tales. In what he did in what later would become the Silmarillion, telling these short stories of what happened in the past, and that all helps you the world becomes more complete, and it hopefully helps you later on to write that story more easily, because you're already so familiar with that world. So that would be my advice. I'm going to wrap things up because it's 8 o'clock. I need to make some food. So sorry if I didn't get to your question. Maybe there are some short ones that I can answer, and otherwise keep them for next week, and I'll absolutely answer them. I'm here every week. What do I think of the Rerum Novarum encyclical? It's been a while since I read it. I just know that it's been foundational to the social doctrine of the church. But I've been motivated to read it again, just so I can understand better what Pope Leo is trying to accomplish. Thomas says, thank you for today's episode of The Walk. Everything you learned from the chat prompt also applied to me. You were able to articulate fears that I've struggled with too. I'm glad to hear that. I was scared to put that one out because it's very, very personal, and it was very confrontational for me to go through that exercise, but it did really unlock a number of things for me. It made sense, and I was able to acknowledge deep-rooted fears that I actually didn't want to acknowledge. And once I started to see, well, but this is really what's truly going on, I kind of made my peace with those feelings, and it opened something new. So I'm really, that conversation was a gift of God. God works maybe even through ChatGPT. Who would have thunk? You look like the actor Wilson from the series House. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I love the series and I love Wilson. I just wanted to say thanks to the news of Pope Leo. In the process of reconnecting with my faith. Thank you for being a part of that journey too. I'm so glad to hear that, and my pleasure. And I'm so glad that you're journeying, and aren't we all? But it's good to journey in company. Isn't faith trust in God? Yeah, absolutely. Trust in God. Even if you can't understand it or you can't see it, or, trust is all about kind of like, let God be God. Let him take you by the hand and trust the process. It's hard. Let's see. I think your English prose is very good. Well, thank you so much, Thomas. But I realize that I still have a lot to learn. The thing that I'm most happy with is that I'm starting to, and this is the way in which I learned French, and maybe also English. I don't know. It's not just the vocabulary. It's not just the words, but it's the feel for the language. It's the cadence. Does that make sense? It's like the rhythm. Sometimes it's like intuition, and I know that instead of writing like a long detailed phrase, sometimes the first version is like very long-winded, like the story that I told myself before I came to do the live stream, this story about the cat and the mouse. That story is like, it took me 35 minutes to tell that story, and I have way too many details. And so what I love doing is then, if I rewrite it, I sometimes realize that this entire paragraph can just be 2 words. And it's almost a dance where sometimes you can just, with 1 word, you evoke something. And it's not really prose. It's just like almost working with emotions. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. And the more I try that and learn from, this is also how I now read other people's short stories, and I read books, and like Terry Pratchett, for instance. I used to hate Terry Pratchett. I was like, I don't like these stories. It's just not for me. It's not my style. And now when I read Terry Pratchett, I love that kind of like cadence that he has, the humor, the little quirks. It's very minimalist to a certain extent, and I like that. I mean, and this is totally different. Like, this is also the way I write the short stories is a very different way of writing and composing than I feel is necessary for my novel. In the novel, I want to be more, I wish, but I want to be more like C.S. Lewis or Tolkien. And it's prose, I want to take my time and just like cast out my words like nets in the ocean. But with these short stories, it's more like, okay, I'm going to tell you a little something. And then it's like, sit up, perk your ears, and follow my lead, follow my finger. Here we go. And it's like, it's much more of a, it's almost like a performance to a certain extent, but it's, I don't even know what I'm saying. It's so hard to put into words what this writing process does when I'm in the middle of it. But I can tell you, it is pure magic. It's really, I'm like, where do these ideas come from? I have no idea. And the stupid thing is, or the weirdest thing is, I know that I have a story. I don't see it yet. But I have an image of a cat and a mouse and a hallway with a marble floor. That's all I have. And I start to tell the story, and it works. And there's a good ending, and there's a twist. And I was like, how? it's the best thing that ever happened to me, writing. I can't believe that it took 57 years of my life to find my calling as a writer. But I have it now, and I will never let go. Never knew you spoke French fluently. Makes me wonder, did you ever put content online in French? Non, j'ai jamais fait ça parce que le français, c'est plutôt une langue que j'aime parler, que j'aime chanter. J'aime prier en français, mais c'est vraiment dur de mettre, de créer des histoires. Aussi parce que je n'ai pas vraiment une communauté qui parle en français. Donc, j'ai des amis qui sont en France, mais ils ne me suivent pas sur Internet, en Facebook ou Substack. Et en plus, si jamais j'écrirais quelque chose en français, tous les autres membres de mes communautés, ce serait impossible de suivre ce que j'écrivais. Donc, c'est pour ça que j'écris jamais en français. J'aimerais bien, donc peut-être dans l'avenir, je ne sais pas. Mais le français, c'est une langue qui mérite d'être parlée, parce que c'est trop beau. Okay, I was just showing off. That was basically this is just to show you I'm not making this up. I do know French, but most people that follow me don't read French, and so if I would post something in French online, people would like, what's happening? But maybe someday. I need to learn Swedish. Yes, Samuel, absolutely. One day, maybe. Louis says, I feel my faith is being tested. I feel like our Lord died, like our Lord did in the garden. How do I overcome this? If you haven't heard the first part of this stream, you may want to kind of go back, because I talk about that. Like, if you feel you don't have the faith, but you long for it, how do you recover it? Open your heart. It will come. But God often just waits for us to open the door, because he doesn't want to force us. But join the community. We're all struggling with this from time to time, but faith is really hard, but all by yourself. That's why I'm so grateful for this community. JD says, I write when the story guides me. If I plot, I become static. That's, for some people it works like that. I always come up with a scene first, and then I write the dialogue first. That's also, what works for one writer maybe works for other people as well, and for other people it doesn't work. That's kind of the fun of the writing process, kind of figuring that out. What is my style? What works for me? Timon says, pray to your Father who is in secret. That's true, yeah. It always starts with prayer, even if it's just in a corner of your house. Frankie says, this is the third time you ask if you are making sense. Yes, Father, you're making sense. I know. I suffer from a lot of self-doubt. But thank you. Thank you for the affirmation. The geek priest always makes sense. Well, I don't know about that. I sometimes don't make sense to myself. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by. It was so much fun sharing. I'd love it if you could read my stories. And if you like them, leave a comment. Feedback, you can't. You really don't believe. You can't believe how important that is. Because I kind of put these stories out there. But yeah, what I said, self-doubt. I'm new to all this. So any feedback is so welcome. Even if it's just like, oh, I didn't care for this story. Or can you write a story about this instead of that? But some feedback goes a long way. And this is true. Thomas, you'll agree with me. Any feedback on what you write as a writer, it's gold. It's pure gold. These gold nuggets, you keep them in your heart forever. So if you want the greatest gift that you can give to a writer is feedback, or share the story. Repost it, because it's not because we're vain and we need our egos to be stroked. No, it's just because we are so insecure that we are constantly craving for someone who tells us, yeah, I like that. Go on, So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your evening or day. And next week, same time, same channels. Talk to you all soon. God bless.